Over the last 10 years or so, there has been what I would consider a renaissance in espresso distribution tools. But as I've mentioned in previous videos on the subject, an even distribution is of an undeniable importance when it comes to espresso. It's one of the few things across all espresso making most, if not everyone who's spent much time doing it, can agree on. So that brings me to the topic of today's video, the Nucleus Coffee Distributor Pulse, or NCD Pulse for short. A new style of distributor that utilizes vibrations in an effort to further the distribution on a vertical plane, but without the focus and fragility of the popular needle-based Weiss distribution tools. So today, we're going to cover the NCD Pulse from top to bottom. We're going to talk about its specs, how it's supposed to be used, and of course run a battery of tests with it, without it, and of course in conjunction to a WDT tool, and see how everything shakes out, no pun intended. But of course, I also should say that I was gifted this tool by Nucleus Coffee Tools, and it was sent to me via their wholesale distributor, Bombora Supplies. As always, though, there was no agreement on what I can and can't say. They just wanted my pure, unadulterated opinions on this tool, and of course agreed to no access to my draft or the contents of this video prior to full public release. But with all that out of the way, we're going to dive right into it after a quick word from this video's sponsor. When it comes to brewing the best coffee, quality ingredients matter. And purely by the numbers, water makes up to 98% of what's in your cup, and it's absolutely vital to the long-term reliability of your equipment. So after months of testing and trials, I've landed on third wave water formulas for all of my coffee preparation. Not only is it designed to not produce scale or cause corrosion, but there's an option for every palate. Third wave water offers a wide variety of mineral blends specifically designed to get the most out of your favorite roast level or brew type. So take control of what is arguably the most important factor when brewing quality coffee today. And head over to thirdwavewater.com/Sprometheus or use code Sprometheus at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Thanks to Third Wave Water for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into it. Okay, so this may be a bit of a review for some, but I do think it's important to sort of lay out this definition before we get too deep into it. Distribution is a word you're going to hear a lot in this video, and what we're talking about or referring to is the way the grinds are laid out in the espresso basket itself. But the term distribution is pretty broad, and oftentimes it's used mainly to refer to the vertical distribution of grinds, as in how flat the top is. And of course, this is part of it, but when you're using a spinning blade tool like the original OCD, you can smooth out a rough surface, but it can leave different densities below the surface. So when tamped and pulled, it will show denser areas as slower flows, the thinner areas as faster, which essentially just creates what we call channeling. So by now you may be asking yourself, if you haven't been paying attention thus far, how does the NCD tool help with that? Well, it vibrates. But this isn't your mother's vibrator, though it isn't too far off. It's sleek, has some heft to it, it's got a couple speeds, it's rechargeable via USB-C, and it's designed to bring pleasure to your palate. But the question is, does it? When it comes to testing the Pulse, or really any piece of equipment for that matter, it's best to look at the manufacturer's stated claims and see if you can verify them. According to Nucleus, the blades spin horizontally to evenly distribute the top layers of coffee grounds, and the vibration of the NCD Pulse improves vertical distribution throughout the coffee puck. Well, we already know that the former is true, we can just plainly see it, but improving the vertical distribution or density of the grinds below the surface is something that's just a lot harder to see. Unfortunately, this isn't something that I could capture on camera using a clear basket. The vibrations, even on the higher setting, to the naked eye don't appear to move the grinds much, if at all, though I'm sure there is an amount of micro-settling and movement is happening. But to test this, I'm going to have to rely on three other factors. The bottomless flow, which more or less shows the level of even distribution throughout the basket. The taste, which granted is subjective, but it can give you some kind of clue as to what was going on during the shot and any sort of channeling or defects. And finally, extraction percentage, which of course has a lot to do with taste because the extraction percentage is based off the solubles that make it into the cup. But a better extracted cup of coffee means the at least theoretically. The puck of coffee got more saturated. Water touched all of it, came through at a nice even rate, and came out, pulled out more solubles. If you have a lot of channeling, you have a lot of dead spots, it means water isn't coming through there. Some of those grinds aren't getting wet, and therefore not extracting. Anyway, first up, I tested a shot distributed solely by hand, no tools. As you can see, not the smoothest. You've got an uneven saturation, leaving a number of dead spots in the basket, with slow or no flow resulting in off-center and a very uneven extraction. This shot, of course, resulted in a cup that tasted somewhat flat. It really didn't carry any of the character from the coffee through to the cup, and generally it just sort of was unpleasant, but not undrinkable. The finish was a little bit more bitter than I would prefer. I would say it's somewhat reminiscent to baker's chocolate. In terms of its percentage, it did fall a little short of the 18% minimum set by the standards of the Specialty Coffee Association at 17.66%. Next up, I pulled a shot using just my standard daily driver, a classic WDT tool. This shot ran very smoothly, with a quick and even saturation of the basket face, immediately coming together in the center and flowing cleanly without any major defects. As expected in the cup, it was a much fuller, rounder shot than the previous. It carried through much more sweetness and acidity and just was generally a really nicely balanced shot of espresso. Again, as expected, through the smoother flow and better tasting shot, the extraction percentage kicked up to 19.21%. And now, in this next one, the NCD Pulse joined the party, with the setting set to 1. As you can see, straight off the bat, the pre-infusion slipped by on the edges of the basket faster than the previous shots. But under pressure, the basket face did fill out quickly, but as the shot progressed, dead spots and channels appeared. Taste-wise though, the shot itself had a smooth and pleasant baseline flavor, but did have a thinner body than previous pulls, followed by sort of that bitter, hollow finish that to me is a pretty dead ringer for an unevenly extracted shot. In terms of extraction though, it eked out an 18.34%, putting it at the bottom of the FCA Espresso standards of an ideal extraction. And next up, we ran it back again, this time with setting 2 after the WDT tool. When it comes to the bottomless flow, it started out fairly even, but ended up with some dead spots that took some time to catch up and then meet in the center, which then gave way to a pretty significant channel. This shot was borderline undrinkable. It carried none of the quality factors I look for in a shot of espresso. It had a thin body, it had a high level of bitterness, it really carried through no characteristics of the coffee I started with, and honestly, it was just flat out not good. And much like the other NCD with WDT shot, this one again hit almost the exact same extraction percentage, 18.33%. And finally, we're testing the NCD Pulse all on its own, on setting 1. The bottomless flow starts out pretty smoothly. It fills out the face very well and centers quickly. There is some turbulence and movement and some little spurts, but overall, the flow was pretty well controlled. In terms of taste, the shot itself was cleaner and brighter up front, but in a good way. It carried through a lot of the fruitier aspects of the coffee that really didn't make it through or weren't that prevalent in previous pulls, though it did fall down a bit in balance, only being beaten out by the WDT. But considering the shot was smoothly extracted and passed the taste test, I wasn't surprised to see it reached a respectable percentage of 19.44%. And last, but certainly not least, the NCD Pulse alone on setting 2. This shot ran, at least from the start, pretty similar to the WDT option. It was smooth and fast in terms of saturation, and it was also pretty clean, if you don't count the odd misting that happened through the latter portion of the pull. Though in the cup, the misting, which was clearly a channel, didn't really seem to have any negative repercussions on the flavor overall. Generally, it was a very round, well-balanced, sweet shot with a little bit more of acidity and a little bit thicker crema and coverage than other shots had previously, so overall, it was pretty enjoyable. And when tested, the pull landed at the highest point of all the previous shots thus far, with an impressive 21.26%. But with all this information, I'm sure many of you are wondering, what's the takeaway? What am I supposed to glean from watching these shots flow, hearing you yap about coffee language, and talk about percentages? Well, let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a scientist. I just play one on YouTube, and these tests and results were on one coffee, one grinder, and one machine. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you this should be the same across all pieces of equipment forever, because there's just way too many variables here. But what I am confident in is saying that these tests do show, at least generally, the effectiveness of the NCD pulse. For one, it appears that the pulse is an effective method of distribution, both horizontally and vertically, as shown by both the bottomless flow and extraction percentages when compared to hand distribution alone. But the results also showed that less sometimes is more. When paired with a WDT tool, there was not only a reduction in extraction percentage from WDT or NCD alone, but also the flavor profile and bottomless flow suffered from more defects. And on that same less is more note, it did seem that when the pulse settings were compared in a 5x5 shot lineup, the lower setting produced more consistent results than the higher, which leads me to believe the lower setting is just a better option because the aggressive vibrations are less likely to be all that predictable. So with the big question answered, whether it works, and I think the answer is yes, the other main question that's lingering out there is, who is it for? And to be honest, it's not for me. I mean, it is a cool piece of coffee kit, but a big part of my love for espresso is the ritual. And WDT is something I don't see myself stopping. But I do think the Pulse would be a great fit for a busy cafe bar or even a place where the users are frequently changing. It's fast, it's easy to use, and it seems to hold a charge, considering I've only plugged it in twice since I got it in March. And at around $200, it sort of falls in line with other popular options like the Auto Comb or Moonraker, which both use fragile needle systems and really aren't that great for, I would say, a cafe type of environment. But on that note, I think it's time to start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the Nucleus Coffee Distributor Pulse? Is it something you think you'd like to add to your puck prep program, or do you feel like it's more of an espresso novelty? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.